Hello, moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas and anyone else that is considering homeschooling a child. This video is for you. We're going to be looking at the difference between homeschooling and doing public school at home. Yes, there are a lot of similarities between the two. For one, the child is being educated at home in both situations. And two, the parent has a huge responsibility in terms of the education of the child. The parent or grandparent or guardian is probably either teaching or at least helping with the learning process, or at the very least facilitating a lot of the learning. So again, lots of similarities, but there are some differences between homeschooling and public school at home. So let's jump in and get started and look at the differences between homeschooling and public school at home. Homeschooling has traditionally been parent-directed and privately funded education of a child at home. But what do I mean by parent-directed and privately funded? Well, parent-directed means that the parent has the say or the final say in their child's education. The parent or another guardian of the child directs the education of the child. That means that they get the final say in what curriculum to use, how to use the curriculum, when to switch curriculum, how fast or slow to move through the material, what content to teach, and when to teach it, and so on. The parent can choose to outsource if they want. So for example, a parent could choose to maybe have their child take a co-op class and do biology lab in a co-op setting. The parent might have the child take an online course that maybe they don't feel equipped to teach. But the key here is that the parent is the final authority in the child's education. The next part of this is privately funded. But what does privately funded mean? Privately funded means that the funds for the education of the child is not coming from the government. It is coming from you as the parent, or maybe a family member like a grandparent who wants to contribute to the education of their grandchild. Maybe it comes from friends or even from some wonderful organizations like the Homeschool Foundation that helps purchase curriculum for families in need. Traditionally, homeschooling has been privately funded because most homeschool families realize that money comes with strings attached, and we don't want to have to jump through a whole bunch of hoops to educate our children. We want to be able to do it the way that we think is best for our unique family and each of our children. And so traditionally we have funded the education of our children on our own, or like I said, from organizations like the Homeschool Foundation that help families in need. But we usually steer clear of what's called free money, but I hope that most of you realize that nothing is free when it comes to the government. There are always strings attached. So on one side we have the traditional model of homeschooling, which is parent-directed and privately funded. On the other end, we have public school at home. This is could look like a couple different things. Maybe because of the COVID crisis, you are having to do the education of your child at home. Your child's enrolled in the public school. They are getting their curriculum from the public school system. You have things that your child has to do, lessons that the teacher is giving them. They're just doing it at home online. So that would be public school at home. We also have public school at home in things like the independent study programs that have been going on for a long time. This is where your child is enrolled in a public school, but they have a unique kind of plan or program that is designed for them that they are doing at home. But again, this is public school at home because your child is a public school student. It is being funded by the government, and there are requirements and regulations and restrictions that you have to abide by. Another kind of public school at home thing would be homeschooling through a charter school. Some charter schools, your child goes to the school all the time, but a lot of them, all day, Monday through Friday. But a lot of charter schools are set up now to cater to homeschooling or home education, educating at home. And so they might have a full homeschool program where they learn at home. Monday through Friday. Maybe they have something where your child goes in a couple days a week for instruction, and then they are home doing schoolwork the other days. Again, this is public school at home for the mere fact that it is not privately funded, it is funded by the government, and there are a lot of restrictions and guidelines that you have to follow. Now, I'm aware that there are many public school at home programs, especially charter schools, that do provide families with a lot of flexibility. And so I'm not saying that it's a bad option, I'm just letting you know the difference between the traditional model of homeschooling and public school at home. But remember, any kind of public school at home, even a charter school, while the parent might have a lot of input, the final authority rests with somebody other than the parent. And so that is one of the big differences between homeschooling and public school at home. With homeschooling, like I said, it is parent directed. The parent has the final say, the final authority when it comes to the education of their children. When you do public school at home, while you might have a lot of say and a lot of input, the final authority is someone else. It is someone in that public school, in that charter school, a superintendent, a teacher, and ultimately the requirements that the government has set in place, both locally and statewide and federally. So I want to remind you that both of these options mean that the child is being educated at home, and both of these options mean that the parent is playing a much larger role in the education of their children than when their children were in the traditional public school or private school. The key difference here is who has the final authority in the education of the child and who is funding the education. Just a quick reminder also that with money comes strings attached when it comes to the government. And so some families, those strings that are attached, you can live within and you can work with. Other families, not the case. So you just have to consider what is best for you. Now, one of the questions I get asked a lot is, well, what option really is the best? And here's what I'm going to say. I believe in parental choice. I believe that parents should have the final say in the education of their children. Not the government, not family, not friends, and certainly not me. I don't know your family, I don't know your children, I don't know your unique situation. And so only you can make the best decision for your children. But here are some pros and cons to both of the options to maybe help you think through which would be best for your family. So let's start with some of the pros and cons of the traditional method of homeschooling, which is, again, parent-directed and privately funded. So the homeschooling pros are, number one, the very fact that it is directed by the parent who loves the child more than anyone else and knows the child better than anyone else. Also, the education can be tailored to the child, which allows children to move forward quicker through subjects they excel in, while also being able to slow the pace in areas that they struggle in to ensure a solid foundation. Homeschooling allows kids to explore more interests and develop their gifts and talents. It provides wonderful opportunities for growth in family unity. It also allows for flexibility in schedules so that you can do your school around your calendar and not someone else's. And the list can go on, but I'm going to leave it there for now. So let's look at some of the cons of homeschooling. A few of the cons of homeschooling that people have brought up to me is, one, the cost, and two, the concern that parents don't know what to teach their kids or when to teach it. So let's look at both of those. First, homeschooling does not have to cost an arm and a leg. It can certainly be done on a smaller budget. But here's the thing. I think the education of our children should be top priority in our family budgets. If you don't think you have the money to pay for homeschool expenses, I encourage you to take a close look at your budget. Where are you spending your money, and what does that say about your priorities? So we have personally chosen to prioritize the education of our children. That means that educational supplies, homeschooling supplies, takes a priority in our budget. And there are things that we say no to, that we have to maybe cut down on, but that's because we have prioritized the education of our children and we have adjusted our budget accordingly. Now, I want to acknowledge that there are some families who are struggling to make ends meet. You cannot spare a single dime towards education because you don't even maybe have enough to pay rent or to put food on the table. And so I want to encourage you and also encourage the homeschool community at large. This is a place where I hope we can come alongside other families who want to homeschool and help them financially. Maybe loan them some of the curriculum that we're not using right now that we've used in the past and letting them use that for free. Maybe giving them discounts in co-op classes. But also remember that there is the Homeschool Foundation that is there to help families in need to purchase curriculum. So I will leave a link to them down below and I encourage you to check them out. Now, the second perceived con that I hear a lot is this. Can parents without an educational degree know what, when, and how to teach their kids? The answer is yes. There are so many resources available today to help homeschool families homeschool successfully. We don't have to live in fear of messing our kids up. Do some research to find out what kids typically learn in each grade. You could even use box curriculum the first year, which will have everything already put together for what a typical child learns at that grade level. Ask questions, do research, and then pick something and start. And switch things up if you need to, but do not let the fear of not knowing keep you from being in charge of your children's education. All right, so what about public school at home? What are the pros and cons of public school at home? Well, there are two main pros that I hear from a lot of families who go this route. And the first one is free curriculum and money that can be used towards homeschool supplies and extracurricular activities. The second pro that I hear from families is that there's guidance and help from an experienced teacher. Now, the funny thing is that the cons are related to the pros. So one con is that free money comes with strings attached. When the government is giving you money, it wants to have a say in how you use it. So some families have found that they can purchase the curriculum that they want, they can use the money in such a way that they can meet the guidelines that are put in place by the public school program that they are going through. On the other hand, some families find it very constraining. Again, do your research and see what's going to work best for your family. Now, I want to talk about this pro that can also be a con in terms of having the guidance and help from an experienced teacher. One of the things that I have found is that yes, there are some amazing teachers out there who know how to teach a large group of kids, and they know a lot about education and child development. But here's the one thing that they might not understand: home education. They don't understand what homeschooling could look like. They don't understand the real benefits of homeschooling and how those are best met when families have more flexibility and more input into the education of their children. So while it might be a pro for you to have the help and the guidance of an experienced teacher, it can also be a con because they might be helping you and guiding you in a way that is not really helpful or beneficial in the homeschooling setting. So again, do your research and see what's going to work best for your family. But I do want to remind you that with free curriculum and free money come regulations. There's going to be requirements that you need to meet, and there's going to be restrictions on what you can teach your student. So you can probably guess that I am for traditional homeschool model, parent-directed, privately funded. But that is what my husband and I have prayerfully decided is best for our family. What I want to encourage you is to figure out what is best for your family. Don't let friends, family, don't let me, and don't let the government tell you what is best for your children. You know your children better than anyone else, you love them more than anybody else, and you want the best for them, and I am confident that you can make the best decision for your family. I hope this helps you understand the difference between homeschooling and public school at home. I would love to hear from you though. Share your thoughts, your comments, your questions down in the comments below.